All right, in this video, we're going to look at the interview process, and we're going to dive deep into the steps in the interview process from start to finish and who all is involved, right? We're going to introduce this idea of the hiring team. So let's recap what we covered in the last video. What we covered was the main objective of the recruiting process is to fill open roles. So in our company example, we know we need to hire salespeople, product people, support people, and we're going to go out in the market, find qualified people to bring them back or recruit them back to our company. And the key tasks involved to fill these open roles are really to source candidates, interview for mutual fit, and then hire the best candidates. So all of this is to help us fill our open roles. So now let's just kind of outline and break down the recruiting process, the interview process from start to finish. So I'm gonna give us some room here, and we're gonna start to outline this. There we go. So this is going to be our interview process. And the first step in the interview process is to source candidates. We need to source candidates that we can go after. Source candidates. Second step is going to be to screen candidates to help us start assessing for mutual fit. Talk more about that in a second. Then we're going to start interviewing them. And there's going to be a couple interviews. So this is interview number 1. This will be interview number 2, and there might be about 3 interviews. Interview number 3. Then we are going to, by that point, we've kind of narrowed down the candidates. We're going to make an offer to one or more candidates, and then we're going to hire. We're going to hire the best candidate. The best candidate is the best fit. Okay, so this is a pretty typical interview process here from start to finish, and this is 7 steps. You may find interviews that are shorter, may find interviews that are longer, but I'd say this is pretty typical here. So now let's go ahead and put the different people that are going to be involved in the interview process on the page. So we've got the candidate who is going to be involved throughout this entire interview process. We've got the recruiter. We've got the recruiter here. And then we have the hiring manager. Who, again, the hiring manager is going to be the eventual boss or manager of the candidate. So eventually the candidate, when they're hired, will report into the hiring manager. And they're going to be involved throughout the recruiting process because they're going to want to, vet and screen this candidate as well to make sure they're a good fit for the team. They can do the job correctly. Now, a couple of the people we're going to add in here before we go any further, on the hiring kind of team side, is what I'll call them, is we're going to have some influencers. So the influencers are going to be other team members, other managers that are going to help to screen or interview, vet the candidate along the way. So we'll call all these influencers. And they're going to come in during the interview process as well. So let's go ahead and label some of this out. The recruiter is going to oversee typically these first 2 steps, the sourcing and the screening of candidates. So the recruiter's job, if you think about this, kind of this group of people down here as the overall hiring team. So let's call this the hiring team. The recruiter's job is to help kick off the interview or the screening or hiring process here. So they're going to source candidates, and they're going to screen them down, and then they're going to pass the best candidates to the hiring team, or the hiring manager and the influencers. So then the hiring manager and influencers are going to take over during the core interview process here. So what a recruiter's doing on these first 2 steps is they're going to source as many candidates as they can that look like they're going to be a good fit for the role. So again, if you remember from the earlier videos, we talked about recruiting is a numbers game where you need to source a lot more candidates than you're going to end up hiring. So let's say we're trying to hire 1 candidate. That's the goal, is to hire 1 candidate here. We're going to need to source, let's call it 100 candidates at the very top of the funnel. We're going to source as many as we can. Then we're going to quickly vet down those candidates during the screening process to find just the best ones that we're going to pass to the hiring team. We don't want to waste the hiring team's time too much. We just want to send the best of the best. So what are we going to do with this 100? Well, we're going to look at their LinkedIn, we're going to look at their resume, we're going to look at their cover letter if they submitted one, we're going to look at their social profiles, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever we can find on them to see if we think they're going to be a good fit for the role. And then we're going to screen call it, 15% of them, right? 15 to 20 of these candidates. And by screening, typically in this step, what you'll do is you'll get on a quick, 15, 20-minute phone call with each candidate. And you'll just ask them some basic questions to get a better feel for them. And then the really good ones, the ones that are, the best of the best, you're going to send into the interview process. So far, we just have the recruiter doing the sourcing and the screening. And then now the hiring manager is going to take over typically on this first interview. So we'll put recruiter, and then we've got the hiring manager coming in on this first interview. And the hiring manager is going to take over. That first interview is going to be 30, 45 minutes. They're going to ask them a lot of questions. They're going to see how good of a fit they are. And then the hiring manager is typically going to pass the best of the best candidates to the influencers. So this is, maybe influencer number 1 does an interview, and then influencer number 2 does an interview as well. And they're going to talk with a subset of those candidates to see if they're a good fit for the role. And then when all said and done, the recruiter and the hiring manager will get together typically and talk about who are the best candidates that we want to extend an offer to. So it's pretty typical to maybe make 2 offers. If you think that one of those candidates might reject your offer, you want to end up with at least 1 candidate. So maybe during the whole course of this, you make 2 offers and one of those candidates will accept and you'll hire 1 candidate. And typically at the end here, the recruiter and the hiring manager will kind of own different pieces of the offer hire phase. If it's a bigger company, it might be more on the recruiter. If it's a smaller company, it might be more on the hiring manager. So just depends on what the company looks like. These last 2 steps, who's going to own what. And we'll talk more about that in later videos. But really quickly, what I want to do here is just mention two other pieces of the puzzle here. So in this sourcing phase right here, you might have one other person come in, and this person would be a dedicated sourcer. And you'll see this pretty typical. This is pretty typical at a large company where this dedicated sourcer is going to spend all their time just trying to get the best candidates possible at the top of the funnel. And they're going to handle this so that the recruiter can spend time screening candidates and working with the hiring manager to vet down and interview the other candidates. And then the hiring team can focus on what they do, which is, interviewing candidates. And of course, running their day-to-day jobs, right? The hiring manager and the influencers are typically, they have a lot on their plate with their typical jobs. So a sourcer will come in here and be a dedicated, kind of lead generation or, going out there and finding those qualified candidates. And this is pretty typical at, a larger company to have a dedicated sourcer for a role. And then you have another person who we'll call the coordinator. So you may have a coordinator. And a coordinator, what they're going to do is they're going to help connect the candidate from step to step in the interview process. So the coordinator is going to come in here and really just help that the candidate experience is running really smoothly from each step. They're going to be on lots of different interviews. They're going to have different people to interview with. These influencers are going to have to coordinate times with the candidate. And you can imagine if you have lots and lots of meetings, going back and forth between the candidate and the hiring team and the recruiter, it can get kind of crazy. So the coordinator is a dedicated person that is helping to schedule these meetings, helping to make sure that the candidate's having a good experience, helping to make sure that the influencers and the candidate are getting connected at the right time, at the right place. So the sourcer and the coordinator, you'll see, are pretty typical positions at mid-sized to larger companies. And in our video on the career path, you'll see that many times as you make your way towards becoming a recruiter, you actually start in one of these 2 roles, either a sourcing or coordinator role. But we'll cover that in more detail in a later video.